Sometimes we let Eric out of his cage to see what he can come up with. He likes to call this Chilton's Useless Trivia. Today it's family pictures in the 1800s and a revealed secret of the U.S. Postal Service.
Did you know that way back in the 1800s, they didn't say cheese when you got your picture taken? No, they said prunes. Prunes. I'm like, why? Why? Well, it's because back then it was looked upon as being goofy if you smiled during photos. Some people think it was because of the technology cameras. You had to hold the pose for a long time. Otherwise the picture would be blurry because the way cameras were operated back then. And it's a lot easier to just stare than it is try to hold a smile. Whatever the reason, nobody smiled back in the 1840s. And they did say prunes to keep their mouth taut instead of cheese to make you smile. Prunes. Prunes. Duck lips before there were duck lips. I don't know about you, I love sushi, especially with the wasabi. In fact, I can't have it without the wasabi, it's so good. But did you know, wasabi is very expensive to make. So most of the companies nowadays use horseradish. It's not even real wasabi. In fact, real wasabi in reality is milder than what most of us get in our sushi packets. You know, we mail packages and letters, sometimes every day, at least every few weeks or so. And you name, address, and zip code. Zip code. I thought, what is a zip code? Well, I did the research. So this goes back to 1944, and a postal worker named Robert Moon, he came up with the idea. The first number in your zip code represents a group of states, from 0 being some on the East Coast, and then it works its way all the way up to 9 if you head out toward California. Think of Beverly Hills 90210, right? That's the first number. The next two numbers represent which regional postal facility will handle the processing of that mail. So a few years later, they say, we got to make this even better. We've talked about what group of states this letter will go to and what regional processing facility. The last two numbers tell them what actual local post office or postal zone that letter will go to. And they said, boy, this is great. It's such an improvement. It is a Zone Improvement Plan, or the ZIP code, zip code. Now you know.
All right, everybody say prunes.
Prunes. Look at your face when you say that.
I'm still smiling, prunes.
That's terrible.
It is horrible.
It is. But you notice they're never cheesy in those photos.
So there were two, I guess, schools of thought, and I couldn't find a definite answer. They said they weren't sure. It was either socially not, like you didn't smile in pictures. They thought that was goofy, you had to be serious. The other school of thought is that cameras had to be held still long enough to have the exposure open for you to get the picture. Oh. So if you moved or smiled or something, it would be blurry. And so they said it was easier for them to stare blankly than to smile for that long.
Look creepy.
I wonder how that turned over time
They said it was, I read that too, but it was 1920s and 30s when people actually started smiling in pictures. I'm not sure why. That was crazy. But I like the zip code thing. I thought that was interesting.
I'm going back to like cheese. So like, why cheese? You know, obviously because it makes that look, but like who came up with that? And how did it spread across the planet?
Yes. Yeah. Cheese.
Cheese.
Look at everyone.
That could be your next useless trivia, to figure out how cheese.
Why the word, why they used to. Okay, I'll look that up. I'll do that one. The wasabi thing was interesting to me because I wonder if I've ever really had real wasabi then.
Right, because you said it's more mild.
They said it was milder if you actually get wasabi, but it's really expensive to make. So that paste that they have in the sushi things that you buy at the grocery store and at sushi restaurants is usually horseradish and food coloring.
Do you eat it? I don't.
I love it.
I
Push it to the side.
The first time I had it on sushi, I didn't know what it was, and I just plopped it in my mouth, and it burned so much. So ever since then, I don't put that on my sushi.
It's I can't hardly eat sushi without it. I love it.
When we were in college, this is going to be a TMI conversation, but one of our friends wasn't scared of wasabi. He had never heard of it, so he said, "Well, just snort a little bit of it."
No,
oh my gosh.
And so he snorted it, and it was really bad. He never did it again.
It's horrible, horrible.
That's something you do to a little kid. I don't think.
Right, it's horrible.